Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Nick Suter, and this is Overtime. What we have at this point is at least four people injured in a shooting at Timberview High School in Arlington. The suspect, a student, is still at large. Apparently, he has fled in a vehicle. It's a 2018 silver Dodge Charger. The student is considered obviously armed and dangerous. Apparently, there was a fight of some kind at the high school. The high school has at least 2,000 students, so it is a very large high school. And the student was involved in an altercation. It's believed, we haven't confirmed this yet, but it's believed at least one of the injured is a teacher. The other three, we believe, are students. Three are hospitalized. We don't know which ones are hospitalized and which ones are not. Two, at a minimum, appear to have been shot. So at this point, there was a lockdown. We have some footage of, obviously, the doors barred from the inside, teachers and students sheltering in place. And right now, that's about all we have, so we're still trying to get up to speed. What you're watching in the center window there is the local NBC affiliate. It's DFW. It's Channel 5, local in Arlington. So let's listen in for a minute and see what they are saying while we try to finish getting up to speed here.
She knows her son. They're okay, correct?
Yes, they are.
So tell me a little bit about this morning. When did you first realize something was going on?
I saw the message from the school, the email. I immediately started calling my son, calling. Jumped up, got dressed. I was panicking and started heading this way. And then, of course, the news coverage started breaking out. There was an active shooter here. And, of course, any parent, it was just overwhelming, scary situation. But I did finally hear from my son, and he's just in shock. He was under a desk right where it happened, and they're going to have to retain him a little longer than the other kids that are being bussed off. But he's telling me, like, a friend is shot, his first period teacher is shot, and he's just nervous and as all would be in shock. And he's just like, Mama, where are you? Just make sure you're here. And I'm out here. I can't get to him, but I'm not leaving until I lay my hands on him. So this has just been an eventful day. I never would have imagined I woke up to this morning. I'm just praying for all families involved and those that got hurt.
And your son, to be clear, was he in the room where the shooting happened, or was he next door?
I can't confirm if he was in the room or next door. He just said, Mom, I was under the desk and it was so loud. But he was able to tell me, like, my first period teacher is shot, my friend is shot, and they're at the hospital. And they won't let me leave because this is the area where everything took place. So pinpointing exactly where he was, I can't even find it on my phone to try to pinpoint which room he was in. But I know that he was there present when it went down. So
now that you've talked to him, you know he's okay. How are you feeling, knowing it might be another hour or so until you actually get to hug him?
I'm still just I'm shaking. I can't even imagine the overwhelming feeling that I have right now. I'm like I said, I'm praying for all those victims or anybody that was involved in the shooting and all these children here at this school, because this is going to be a lot for them to recover from. I can only imagine how shocking this can be when you're supposed to be at a safe place and somehow a gun gets in the school. I feel like certain protocols need to be put in place. How did the gun get in school? Are they even checking kids' bags at this point? I know this is supposed to be a premier ISD, but what are you doing to protect my child?
We know, as I was talking to another parent earlier, there's no roadmap for this on how you talk to your kid about what happened, how you cope with what is going on. Is there anything you're kind of waiting to tell your son when you see him?
I just want to tell him, I love him, and we're a praying family. So I knew God had his hand on his life, and I just gonna have to walk him through this of what happened, and just make sure he's not, fearful even just to come back to school, because that's a lot for a child to take on, a 15-year-old, to see all this take place and unfold. Like I said, I wouldn't wish this or on anyone, any family, anything.
All right, so this is an interview. This is MSNBC Channel 5. Sorry, not MS. It's NBC Channel 5 in Texas. It's just outside. It's slightly between Fort Worth and Dallas. We have 4 injured in a shooting at Timberview High School. One says Mansfield, the other one says Arlington. But they're currently looking for. So apparently there was a fight somewhere on the second floor between a number of students. One of them appears to have pulled out a gun and started shooting. We, at this point, believe that 3 people were shot. One of them appears to have been a teacher. The other 2 students, we don't know how the 3rd injury happened, or the 4th injury happened. 3 are currently in the hospital. We do not know their condition. The suspect got into his car and fled. The suspect's name is Timothy George Simpkins. He is at large and considered armed and dangerous. He is in a 2018 silver Dodge Charger, license plate PFY 6260. Right now, okay, let's listen and see what this update is here. Hold on a second.
The school itself has gotten an all clear. There is no continued threat at the school. And we do know that the students were safely escorted on buses to the Mansfield ISD Center for the Performing Arts. They've also pointed out that they will have counseling services available for students and parents at this location, the location where parents and students are meeting up at the Center for the Performing Arts. They'll have counseling services there immediately. So that's part of what we're seeing about the, just with the delay and them getting together, so to speak. A lot of things going on right now. Police, of course, still taking photos of every student's ID as they exit buses and go into that center. Back now to this scene where we have been watching quite a bit of police action there right now. Mm-hmm. Well, it's been not a lot of action, but a lot of police presence, I should say.
Exactly. Yeah, this is a little more than a neighborhood, a little more than a mile away from Timberview High School near Collins and Harris Ridge. We have been watching these 2 members of law enforcement. You see them, they're kind of in the middle of the screen, staged there in the middle near that SUV. And they are members of the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force. We've been able to identify that by the jackets they are wearing. The U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force is involved in the search for the 18-year-old suspect, Timothy Simpkins, a man that authorities have identified, an 18-year-old, as.
So that's the suspect right there. He is 18 years old. He was involved in an altercation on the 2nd floor of the high school. He appears to have pulled out a weapon. At least 3 people are shot. One of them is believed to be a teacher. A total of 4 people were injured. 3 are in the hospital right now. He is at large. The police are asking for assistance in finding him. He is considered armed and dangerous. He is driving a 2018 silver Dodge Charger with a license plate PFY 6260. Police are saying that if anybody has any information as to where his whereabouts, do not approach him, and please call 911 immediately. That is presumably his house. So police are attempting to find this man. Happened earlier this morning. I think it was about 9 a.m. Eastern. It appears that one of the injured is a teacher. The other 3 are presumably students. At least 2 of them we believe he was in an altercation with. 3 total are in the hospital. We do not know their condition today. If he's 18, he may have obtained the gun legally. That's possible. I am curious to know how and where he got the gun. This always influences, of course, gun debates. If he got it from, say, a parent who hadn't properly locked it. This does bring to mind 1 or 2 points I'd like to bring up, but I want to make sure that we are caught up and everyone is caught up with where we are. Let's listen to what this woman has to say. Again, we are listening to the local NBC affiliate Channel 5, and let's hear what they have to say.
That people are being brought into the hospital, and we're just hoping for the best. We're hoping that there's no casualties and that all of our babies can come out of that school okay.
Again, that was sound from a couple of parents taken earlier while that lockdown was still underway, and you can hear just the terror and the panic in their voices. It's very frightening. And right now, though, we're about to see the reunions between the children and their parents, hundreds of parents on the steps there, sort of snaked in front of the Mansfield ISD Center for the Performing Arts. And we understand that counseling will be available for those families immediately after they are reunited.
Yeah, this is a school of about 2,000.
So 2,000 students. So obviously hundreds of families, probably roughly at least 1,000 families, one would imagine, at least. We do not know the status of those in the hospital. Again, ostensibly one is a teacher. All right, looks like, oh God, if we had 2 breaking newses in one sitting, wouldn't be the first time. So if you're just joining us, I'll do a quick rundown about what we know. We're trying to see, we're trying to collate, as always in these situations, if you can bear with us. Yeah, he's 18. And they just showed his picture. It'll probably come back up again. We have it. We can show it at some point. I may put it up in camera 2 there in a second. We'll see. Again, if you see him, do not approach him. He's armed and dangerous. Obviously, he is driving a 2018 silver Dodge Charger. License plate PFY 6260. Police are asking for any assistance in finding him. We just saw pictures outside his home. U.S. Marshals are outside the home and trying to find him. He's out there somewhere. Do not approach. If you see his car, if you see him, dial 911 and stay very far away. So what we have is earlier today at this high school, it was Timberview High School in Arlington, Texas. This young man, apparently, Timothy George Simpkins is the suspect. It appears from reports that what happened was he got into an argument, pulled out a gun, fired it. At least 3 people are in the hospital. We don't know their condition. 1 is believed to be a teacher. Total of 4 injured. So we're looking into that now. We have some footage of the inside of the school as it was locked down. Chairs, everything you can imagine pushed up against the door to keep him out. They are saying that this was not a random incident. So he was not just going in shooting at people. It was targeted, but not necessarily premeditated. Happened presumably during some kind of altercation, and he is now at large and obviously considered very dangerous. So they're going to try to find him, and that's about all we know. Again, it's about 2,000 students at the school. It looks like the youngest in the school is 13, going through 18. And that's it. So hello to everyone who's joining us. Thank you all for coming. Open carry. Yeah, I have to believe, Bregwin, and if you have any information on this, I'd like to know. I have to believe you would either need a permit or cannot, in fact, carry a firearm onto school property. I have to believe just having it there was illegal. But I have to. It's Texas. I don't know. Yeah. All right. So let's listen again and see what they're saying. It looks like they're talking about the suspect and the search for him, which is ongoing. U.S. Marshals and ATF are involved, and they are trying very quickly, working with local police and helicopters to try to find him.
Points of information we're hearing from parents as well. They want to know how the school I thought was supposed to be safe. How does a student get a gun onto campus and then the shooting and the fight break out?
Yeah, and I think we should point out that not many schools don't have, or most schools maybe don't have metal detectors, so that's not something that they would be able to know what's happening immediately. I don't know what the situation is at this school, but I think most schools probably do not. So again, a live look here, or a look here at the buses coming in. I think this is a look from earlier when the buses were arriving to Timberview to to pick students up. This is actually a live picture. So this is them being dropped off at the Center for the Performing. There we go. There's a picture of the building.
And you know what, too, Christy, looking at this, our photographer there had an image of, this is Mansfield Timberview. This is the high school that we're seeing here. And the man who we were looking at spoke to 𝐒𝐨𝐿𝐒 a short time ago, and he had 2 students. He has 2 children who were in this high school. He was on the other side of town when he's noticing the text coming between his students and his wife of a shooting on campus, and he immediately got in his vehicle, got to this high school, and he says, "Yeah, I know you're going to put him on this bus, and I know where to go, but for this moment, I'm staying right here on the side of the road until I see my children eye to eye." He knows they're safe, but he is not leaving that spot until he's able to see them.
And there he is.
Yep.
So a very emotional day for these families, for the school, for the district, for the city. You know, these schools, we talk about these school shootings all the time. And again, police were very careful to say that this was not the same as an active shooter situation, not a random shooting. However, we do know that they would respond the same way. You know, these schools have trained for active shooter situations. You hope that it never happens to you, but we have heard of several shootings around the country since students started to return to school after a year of virtual learning for many districts because of the pandemic.
All right, we want to get to Rudy Nieves from our sister station, Telemundo 39, also visiting with loved ones awaiting reunification with their.
All right, there's an error. CNN is reporting right now active shooter situation in Texas high school. That report is in error. That's CNN right now. They are incorrect. It is not an active shooter situation. You know, that's an important distinction that NBC has just made. It's CNN. I don't know what they're doing. We're not gonna go to it, but CNN is inaccurate. Nonetheless, the shooter is obviously at large. It looks like the suspects were specifically. It wasn't a random situation, so it doesn't look like he's targeting anyone else. It doesn't look like he has any interest in shooting anyone else. Having said that, if anyone tries to apprehend him, that's anybody's guess as to what's going to happen. So the police are saying if you spot him, stay away from him. He was last seen getting into his car. It was a 2018 silver Dodge Charger. Yeah, CNN is actually getting this wrong. I don't know if you're watching CNN now. They are. This is not an actor. They're saying as of. CNN has this wrong. At any rate, the Arlington police are asking for help in finding. He's 18 years old, Timothy George Simpkins. Nobody at this point knows where he is. I have to believe also that he's armed, so they are possibly concerned about self-inflicted wounds at this point. Obviously under a lot of stress and realizing that he is in a phenomenal amount of trouble. This was not pre-planned, but the victims were deliberate. They were targeted. They were not random. So I'll do a rundown in a minute to sort of explain, if you're just joining us, where we are. But I think it's important to note this is not an active shooter situation. The school has been, the lockdown was released. The students have left. What you're seeing now, actually, I believe, is not the school. That is a music and arts. You're looking at not the school. It's an arts center, which is where they have gone to meet with the families. It is ostensibly a secure location. Active as he has not yet been apprehended. My understanding is that it's actually still not active because I don't know. I mean, that's a good. Perhaps according to NBC, it is not an active shooter because he is left the school, so he's not an active shooter, at least in the school area, and B, he is not considered. He's not actively going after or targeting anyone else. What he does when they try to apprehend him is anybody's guess. But I'll okay. This is an issue regarding gun culture in the U.S. It's less about permitting it. Yeah, well, and I mean, my father was a criminal defense attorney, and he mentioned all the time that when he first started practicing, it never crossed anybody's mind to put metal detectors in courthouses. You would never even, I mean, if you said that that should happen, people would laugh and would actually say it's a very bad idea. And you didn't need them back then. Nobody ever thought of shooting a judge or shooting a lawyer or shooting anybody like that for any number of reasons, not the least of which is one of the ways that our system stops violence is by making sure there's always a way to appeal. There's always a way to continue fighting your case if you're interested. Almost, I mean, you can keep fighting almost forever in our court system, but that there's a point to that. The idea is you're much less likely to commit violence if you give up because you've been fighting for so long, and there's just so many administrative things to do. You're less likely to commit violence giving up than you are just being outright denied and told no. And there's a lot of truth to that. And there was always a way to appeal, always at least a chance you could get out on some kind of appeal or technicality. So you didn't go around shooting people because that would just make your life worse. Even if you were a convicted murderer, you wouldn't do violence in a courthouse. Nowadays, of course, that's not even close to true. So our culture has changed. When I taught high school, one of the schools I taught in, South High in Worcester, was an inner city gang school. The year I taught there, they had already had metal detectors to stop knives. In particular, it was knives that was the issue, and then when a student couldn't use a knife, he stabbed a teacher with a pencil. That's inner city, so there's always going to be some differences, but nonetheless, I think at some point we're going to have to just reach the conclusion that one thing that's going to have to receive funding is metal detectors for every high school, because this obviously cannot be permitted. I don't like the culture, and I don't like the fact that that's where we have to go with this. But on the flip side, this kind of thing really, the schools have to be safe, and I don't. Xandring would know the statistics better than but I don't think most other countries have to deal with this in schools. This is even Canada's had some mass shootings, but they have far fewer than we do. Yeah. And permits is just one other issue. I mean, as Xandring and I were discussing the gun numbers a short while ago, and he had some interesting points on that. And one of the very few people who's ever had any impact on my views regarding the Second Amendment. So I appreciate his insight, and I certainly don't want to straw man any of his arguments or suggest that this is a perfect example of why all guns have to be banned. But the fact that this can happen, the fact that we don't have, for example, we don't have a ballistics profile on every gun that's ever been manufactured. We should have that. Norway, if I remember it's Norway, somebody's going to get me because it's not Norway. Norway forces you to have a gun. You're required to have a gun. In Norway, the government gives you a gun and you have to take it. And the reason is because they actually have a militia. Norway, I think it's Norway, I want to say Sweden, but I always get those confused. They have a militia. They have a greater density of defensive military per square mile than any other country in the world. And the reason is because all the citizens are actually part of the militia. But you get training. You're responsible for the firearm. The firearm has a ballistics report, so if it's used in any crime, they know right away whose gun it was, and they're knocking on your door hours later. If we had a system like that, I probably still would be against the Second Amendment, but I wouldn't be as vocal about it, and I'd be much more comfortable with it and willing to say, okay, compromise. It's not my favorite amendment, but you know what? As long as we're being responsible about it. The NRA has guaranteed that is utterly impossible in this country, and it's unfortunate because I'd be willing to compromise on gun control if they were actually sane about it, because Norway takes one look at us and says, holy smoke, no country should be that crazy. And these guys, this is a country that literally forces you to have a semi-automatic, convertible to fully automatic firearm under your bed. I mean, give me a break. So let's listen in, and I'm going to try to catch up and see what's going on here. I don't see anything really new, but I do want to do another rundown, so we will do a rundown in a minute. And I also want to catch up on the live chat, because it looks like there's a interesting discussion there. So I will catch up with everyone in a sec.
This bus and on his way to that pickup center before he leaves. Back to you.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. And when he gets there, thank you so much, Lily. And when he gets there, this is what he will drive up to. A lot of congested traffic there in the front of the Mansfield ISD Center for Performing Arts. A lot of parents out here too, awaiting that moment when they are back with their children. It is they've put up parents are kind of formed a snake. They're snaking in front of this building. We don't
there are
know.
hundreds of people there.
Yes. Well, when you think about probably 2,000, 2,000 students, Christy, and then, mom might want to come, dad. We've also seen other children there in the line too as well. Okay. All right, we want to get back to our Katie Blakey. Katie was the one who spoke to that parent, Brittany Barnes, just a compelling interview. Her son, of course, still in the building as potentially a witness to what happened. And Katie, I know you've been talking with another mom as well.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, I'm aware they have time to fill, and I'm aware that it's a great way to boost ratings to be talking to the moms and dads. I'm also aware that there isn't anybody listening to this that doesn't have at least some empathy with what they must be going through, so I'm trying to avoid listening to too much of that. It's absolutely terrible. It's absolutely shocking, and there's about 1,000 families right now that are going through it, so it doesn't hurt to listen to it, to remember what we're talking about, but I'd rather try not to focus on it. So, Pat, this was my understanding, is what Pat said. It's an active shooter. It's generally considered an active shooter until you are highly confident that the suspects have left the primary incident location, which we know for a fact he has. He's in a car. Nobody knows where he is, but he ain't there anymore. So my understanding is it's not an active shooter by that definition. CNN is calling it an active shooter. MSNBC, probably aware of what CNN is doing, has repeatedly said it's not an active shooter. But Pat's been out of law enforcement for a little while, so yeah, I mean, ballistic profiles aren't the equivalent of, so I'd like to have that discussion both with Pat and perhaps on the show at some point. But so what do we know? Well, earlier today at Mansfield Timberview High School, which is in Arlington, Texas, it's right between it's just outside of, I think, Fort Worth and a little south and west of Dallas, but it's pretty central. School has about 2,000 students. On the second floor, a suspect, Timothy George Simpkins, appears to have gotten into an altercation with at least 2, maybe 3 students. At some point, he pulled out a gun and began firing. 3 people appear to have been shot at this point. A 4th has been injured. We do not know the extent of the injuries. We do know 3 people are in the hospital right now. We also do not know their condition. One of the people shot, it appears at this point, is in fact a teacher. All of the others are students. That's about all we know. Now, the suspect got into his vehicle and drove away. He is now at large and is considered armed and extremely dangerous. The police are looking for him. They are asking for assistance in finding him, and they are asking anybody who has seen either him or his vehicle to immediately call 911 and under no circumstances approach him or his vehicle. He is driving a 2018 silver Dodge Charger. The license plate is PFY 6260. So, and I'm aware, because of the way the audio is set up, when I turn this way, the audio may drop dramatically. If that's an issue, people, please just let me know. And then I can either switch audio or, I don't know, I'll try to just I've got 4 monitors here, different ones with different information. I'm not always facing the microphone. At any rate, that's about all we know. Now, the school has been evacuated. It was on lockdown, obviously. It's been evacuated to an emergency meeting location, which is a Center for the Performing Arts. That's actually what you've been seeing right now. It's not the high school. It's a Center for the Performing Arts. Every single student is being double-checked for their ID. The IDs are being photographed and logged as they get off the bus and are being reunited with their parents at this location. We're going to now listen for a minute, and then I'm going to, there goes Red killing the chat again. That's just like, I think she just shows up to just mess with the chat and just like, oh, the show's going great. Let's see if I can, that's my view.
Him, he didn't answer. It took him a few minutes, and he was able to text me back and say, "Mom, I'm okay." We're locked in the band room, and I asked him, I said, "Is there a shooter?" And he was able to tell me, "Yes, there is a shooter, but we're okay." Yeah. We are in the safest room in the building. Yeah. And he's been able to text me and tell me, they're okay, and I've been able to give him information. Like I was just able to tell him, like, when they come in to sweep the room, you sit perfectly still, you don't move, you follow directions, because I know these kids are scared, and they,
14, he's a freshman, right?
Exactly.
So he's new in high school and still kind of finding his way around.
Exactly. And we were virtual last year, so we haven't been to school in a year and a half, so yeah, it's very scary. And the ability to be able to get the information from the kiddos to know that your kid's okay was very important. Yes, absolutely.
He was in the band room for some period of time, is that right? You told me he plays the trombone.
Yes, sir. He plays the trombone in the marching band, and they were locked in there from about 9 o'clock on until they loaded him on the bus. And so
you've heard from him about the bus. Is he on a bus yet? Is he on his way? What's the situation you've heard?
He said that they were led out of the building, hands up, on their heads, a SWAT team kind of thing. They were loaded onto the bus, and that they are on the bus on their way here.
They were going to take pictures of all the students, they said, before they left, to make sure they would be able to keep track of them as they came here for this very unusual transfer.
Yes.
Do you find all of that comforting? You think they're doing things pretty well given the situation?
I do. I'm very happy. I like the idea that, they're taking pictures of the kids to make sure that all the kids get on the bus and that everybody's accounted for and there's nobody left in the building, so nobody else has a gun.
Yeah. There's such a presence of law enforcement and all here. Do you find that to be...
Hold on. Yeah, they believe he's still on the road somewhere. So I'm listening to a police, a separate police briefing, and they say they believe he's still on the road somewhere. They don't know where, and there is a sizable, at this point, manhunt looking for him. So, it's becoming, I remember, again, in high school, I was doing active shooter drills, and I think I was there the first year they started doing them, and it was a little surreal. So to address a couple of things, just FYI, and we're not going to relitigate my views on gun control at the present moment. Hopefully, maybe as Andrew will be able to join. My guess is he's probably away from, but it's I'm glad that it's being taken seriously enough that we're having standardized procedures for this. I think there aren't any other industrialized nations that have to do that. Red brought up a good point. My father made the same point and taught me a little something about how it works, because he had gotten, I guess, for my stepmother a rifle. But it was a very small shot, like a 22 or something like that, which isn't going to do anything to most animals unless you put armor-piercing bullets on it. So it was a very low caliber so that she could fire it reasonably accurately, but armor piercings to make up for the fact that it was rather low caliber. Now, a 22 is still probably going to go right through a bear. Yeah, even if it's armor piercing, it may go in and out, but it isn't necessarily going to stop a bear unless you're real lucky where you hit it. But nonetheless, I think Red makes a very good point about, and believe me, it pains me whenever I put the words "red" and "good point" in the sentence together. But I think she makes a very good point about, even if when I am against the Second Amendment, I am not necessarily saying ban all guns in this country. And one thing, obviously, the military is still going to have them. I don't think the police should, by the way. I really don't. Police having guns is you have to. Right now, because we arm our criminals. So if we're going to arm our criminals, I kind of think you have to arm the police. But I don't like them being armed, and I think if you speak to most of the African-American population in this country, they'll tell you they don't like the police being armed. So I'm just as eager to get the guns out of a police officer's hands, but you can't do that right now. You just can't. That's not practical. So, but having said that, I'm also not against, I don't think that, you remove the Second Amendment, which is simply the right to bear arms and that anybody can have any gun roughly anytime they want. Remove that. Doesn't mean get rid of all guns completely. It doesn't mean that there aren't circumstances under which people should absolutely, private citizens should absolutely be allowed to have firearms. But I think you need to do that a bit more of a case-by-case basis and have a procedure for that. I don't think it's just a, gun show loophole. Anybody who wants one can get one, which is really the status that we have right now. Well, it's I'm in pain more often than I care to admit, but what can you do? All right, so let's see what they're. Jeez, smart ass. Let's see what they're saying right now, and I'll probably do another rundown in a minute.
Well, we know, Zuli, as long as law enforcement is there, you will be there trying to gather what information you can. Thank you for keeping us.
This appears to be outside his house, and U.S. Marshals are there.
Arlington, where we believe the victims were transported. Brittany, what's your update?
Well, so far, we can still confirm that one 15-year-old brought here to Medical City Arlington. A spokesperson from the hospital just came down a few minutes ago and said that they're still relying on Arlington PD to release most of the information, including confirming how many of those victims have been brought here. But we do know, again, that the 15-year-old was brought here. One of the 4 victims in this case, again, police saying they know 2 of them were injured in the shooting directly, and they haven't shared specifics on the details on how the other 2 were injured. I went over to Mansfield Hospital a little bit earlier today, and they said that while they were on standby, just in case they needed to bring in some of the victims to their trauma center, at that point they had not received any yet. So that's why we're here at Medical City Arlington, because we believe this is most likely where all of them at some point could potentially be treated, but we're waiting for an update from Arlington PD on that. We have seen a couple of other people come out here, and just about 20-30 minutes ago, we saw Arlington PD officers right near the entrance of the trauma center again. So the activity picked up after being quiet for a while here at Medical City Arlington, but we're going to stay here. We're going to stand by until we can bring you updates on the condition of the victims in this case.
All right.
So before I do a rundown, just to clarify on what that was not helpful. What we know is 4 people have been injured. We don't know what those injuries are, but our understanding currently is 3 of them were people who've been shot. 3 are in the hospital. Ostensibly, it's going to be all 3 who were shot. One of those that has been shot is purportedly a teacher. And at this point, new information there. It looks like one of them is a 15-year-old student. At least 2 were students, 1 a teacher, to the best of our understanding. 3 shot, a 4th injured. We do not know how. We do not know the status of any of them. They are, according to this very helpful reporter, they were. Hold on. To the best of our understanding right now. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. So we have 3 people shot, a 4th injured. One appears to be one of the victims is a teacher. Another one apparently is a 15-year-old student. This was an altercation. This was not a. Yeah, that's true. Both statements. This was not a random incident, but it was also not pre-planned. So it appears that the student, the suspect is now 18-year-old Timothy Simpkins. He apparently. Allegedly was on the 2nd floor of the high school, got into an altercation with, as we understand it, presumably 2 students. He, at some point, pulled out a firearm, fired. 3 people appear to have been hit, 1 a teacher, 2 other students. A 4th person was injured. We do not know how. He fled, got into his vehicle, and is now at large and considered armed and extremely dangerous. Police are asking for people's help in finding him. He is driving a 2018 silver Dodge Charger. The license plate is PFY 6260. We've seen photos of U.S. Marshals and ATF at his house. They are obviously now, I doubt he's going to go there, but they're waiting there for him nonetheless. And there is an active manhunt for him that is involving now federal agencies as well as the Arlington police, and it looks like probably I would assume Dallas police and a few others are involved. They believe he is actually still driving. I don't know what causes them to say this. Maybe they've from a helicopter, ferreted out all the places he could have parked. I don't know, but they believe he is still on the road somewhere. At least that's what we heard from the police briefing just moments ago. So they're asking for help. If you see him or see in his picture, will no doubt come back up in a minute. If you see him, see his vehicle, any of these things, you are asked to not approach and call 911 immediately. So once again, we're going to listen in, and I'm going to try to collate this. I don't see any evidence of anything new coming in. So let's see where we are right now.
High school, and then now the suspect who's at large. Did police indicate anything about how you got a kid who allegedly pulls out a gun, opens fire, and somehow was still able to escape the school and still remains on the loose? Did police paint any sort of picture about how that happened? Once the gunfire occurred, how that student may have gotten out of the school? Anything more about what happened right after the shooting?
They did not speak to that, Deborah, though that's clearly a very legitimate question to ask, considering what has happened here. We do know, according to police, according to that information shared in that news conference shortly after 11 o'clock this morning, which at this point, geez, that's about 90 minutes or so ago, the information we received is there are two Mansfield ISD police officers here at the school. Where they were in relation to this second floor classroom is not yet known. How specifically the events unfolded that started with an argument of some kind, that led to a gun being pulled, that led to multiple shots being fired, that led to ultimately this student getting away, getting out of the school, getting into a vehicle and driving away. That has not been made clear, though certainly at this point they can confidently say that that student is not here, that there is no more threat in this school. But how A led to B led to C, this naming of a student, this Timothy Simpkins, and being confident that he is not here, that has not been spelled out, Deborah. Okay, yeah, well, understandably, when you've got 4 people injured, I mean, the rush is to get to them. Are they okay? Treat them and make sure everybody else is all right. All right, Ben Russell, thank you so much. Let's check in again with Lily Zhang, who's also at the scene of the school on the other side. Lily, what do you have for us?
Christy, Deborah, we're on the east side of Timberview High School. So far, we've seen about 17 buses filled with students leave this campus. Behind us, through this line of buses, you can see on the campus itself, there is still heavy police activity here. Now, on this side of campus, we've heard from some parents who say, they are aware that parents have been told to go to that pickup center on Debbie Lane, but from their perspective, they just want to know that their students are safe on the bus and on their way to the center before they leave. We've gotten a chance to talk with them a lot this morning. And one parent in particular I spoke with says he has 2 students at the school. One is already at the center. He's out. The other student is still waiting and in his classroom. He says that officers have checked on the classroom that he's in. And again, he and his classmates are safe. But parents that we spoke with say they just want to know that their students are safe before they go off to the center itself. And their concerns and their worries echo many of the parents we've heard from so far.
I spoke with my daughter, and my daughter called me to let me know that there was a shooter inside the school and that apparently somebody had been shot. But I mean, kids are overwhelmed. They are in their classrooms sitting. Teachers apparently are doing a great job, and I am amazed with the quick response of the police department. They're all here blocking everything, trying to keep our kids safe. Schools have opened recently and kids are excited to go to school, and then this happens again. I feel like, they're trying to they're trying to go back into society. They're trying to get their...
Yeah, I'm depends on how charitable I am at any given moment, because it changes from moment to moment. A lot of this is filler, right? Because their job is to cover news, and that's great. That happens to be what I'm doing. So I have empathy for the job, and I like to think it's a good one and an important one. But on the flip side, they're waiting till they're waiting until we have more news, and we're not going to have any more news until this kid is found. So they're filling, and mostly filling with the sob stories. I really hate the leading questions like, would you say that this was the most terrifying moment of your life? So we all know that this is an absolutely terrifying situation for probably at least roughly about 1,000. Yeah, your Russian could use a lot of work typing. I was sitting there trying to figure out what on earth you were saying, and I speak Russian, so but all right. At any rate, they're filling for time, and I get that. I have to fill for time all the time. So, but some of it is just oh dear Lord. So they're trying to find this student, and there was actually another. There was a question that I did want to address in the chat. They're asking, well, how did the guy get out? And I think Titan, he's got a gun. If I didn't know how many officers there were. Titan says there were 2, so I assume he found that somewhere. So if there were 2 officers there, which most high schools now do have an officer who's at least part-time, if not full-time. On campus, it's 2,000 students. If you're an officer, maybe one of them heard the shot, assuming one of them was you'd think in a high school you'd be able to hear the shot from just about anywhere in the high school. Guns loud, but on the flip side, so are high schools. And if it was in between classes, which I have to believe it probably was, that means the halls are filled. There's a lot of students there making noise. The officers may be filling out paperwork. Maybe they're watching stuff. I don't know. But assuming the officers were even able to hear the shot, trying to figure out where it came from, and then finding the actual suspect amid 2,000 panicking students has to be reasonably hard. And then he gets into the car and bails. I don't think it's any shock that he got out of there okay. I'd have been, no, it wouldn't be less shocking if he got caught. But he goes, you see, oh God, I hate reading Russian and English. Get a Cyrillic keyboard. I shouldn't say that because I don't have a Cyrillic keyboard, but okay. They mentioned 2 officers on, okay, perfect, thank you. Tozny's okay. Oh, ty znaешь. Okay, now okay, yeah, okay. All right. So, anyways, I'm going to do a rundown in probably a minute. Obviously, federal authorities are involved at this point. There is a manhunt in the state of Texas right now to try to find this young man. He is 18 years old. It appears he has shot 3 people in a high school. One of them is a teacher, the other 2 students. One of the students, we believe at this point, is 15 years old. A 4th person was injured. They're currently, that we're aware of, 3 people in the hospital. We do not know their status. We do, the hospital has said that they're going to be releasing the status to the police and allow the police to disseminate that information in whatever way they choose. ATF and U.S. Marshals are at the boy's house. Oh, there! Oh my God, there it is. Yeah, Toja, I always speak. Yeah. You don't always speak Russian, but yeah, okay, much better. That I can read. Thank you. Odd comment. There you go. Speaking of, okay. I always speak Russian. Yeah, and I'm okay. It is. It's actually that I can read. Thank you, by the way. It's indulging me by actually translating that into the actual correct alphabet. So, right now, as I said, just like sort of we're doing, it's yeah, of course, it's Texas, unfortunately. We're all just waiting because this kid is out there. They are trying to find him, but there are a lot of cars on Texas highways. Everybody's looking for him. They know the car they're trying to find. He is not a criminal mastermind, so he probably has not swapped cars. He probably, and to be honest, I will say this. He may be a psychopath or sociopath. There's no way to know. He may also just be a terrified kid who had a gun because he thought it would be cool, and then got ticked off, lost his temper, and started shooting. That's a perfectly reasonable scenario. So at a minimum, he's probably, I'm going to go with he is probably at this point terrified and has no idea what to do. And how, if I were in his shoes, I'd have no idea what to do. And I'm a reasonably well-seasoned adult. So, it's obviously a tragedy for his family as well. And I think that's easy to forget. It's easy to forget that he's a human being too. With any luck, all of the people that have been shot will survive. And with any luck, something can be done to figure out how this kid should be treated, because I am not a fan of taking people who make a mistake and throwing them in jail for the rest of their lives. And since we don't know what happened, and kids that age do really stupid things. And if they happen to have a gun, the gun doesn't make it any dumber, actually. It doesn't. All it means is when you do something stupid, you have a greater chance of really hurting somebody. I've made that same argument when it comes to guns and suicide. And we've talked about this. The suicide rate, when it pertains to guns, gun pro-Second Amendment advocates will say, well, you can't use those numbers in suicide because, suicide is self-inflicted. You can use those numbers. You just can't use them completely. And the reason is because many of those people would still have found a way to commit suicide. But not all, because what a gun enables you to do is if you have a very bad idea, like a fleeting moment where you have some kind of suicidal ideation, if you have to go through the process of actually figuring out how you're going to do it and go through a lot of people end up not going through with it. Suicidal ideation happens to a great many people for a very short period of time. The problem with a gun is it accelerates the process and allows you to complete the act before you can think any better. Guns, more than anything, allow people who have very poor reactions to do something very stupid before they have a chance to think about it. It's one of my biggest objections to guns. We don't know anything about this kid. It's entirely possible he's a sociopath and has a huge record, although if he did, my suspicion is we'd know about it by now. Seems to me to be somewhat more likely that, maybe he had the gun for protection. Maybe he really was looking to start something. I don't know. But just from what I'm hearing right now, I do have some empathy for this kid who I certainly did not wake up this morning and say, I'd like there to be a manhunt across the entire state of Texas to find me today. That was not his intention. So whatever else, he's a human being who's a victim of this. Well, no, I'm not going to go that far. He's a human being who is suffering in this as well. So what I'm going to do is, it looks like there's some discussion in the live chat. I do want to hear this. So let me catch up with a couple of things. This is outside his home right now, where ATF and U.S. Marshals are waiting. Heavy police activity around this area. They have about a few blocks, maybe 2 blocks that are completely blocked off. There are still, outside a home. And we actually do have a neighbor here, Steven. He's going to talk to us. He lives around this neighborhood. He's been out here just like several other, residents. They have concerns. They have a lot of confusion of what's happening, but just tell us, what have you seen this past hour?
Well, for the past hour, behind the camera, you could see a group of growing parents, mainly parents waiting for their kids in local schools nearby, right next door, with little ones in pre-K that they don't let them out just yet. So there's a growing concern of what's going on with some parents still waiting for their children, not so much at Timberview, but in local schools with heavy police presence with armed guns.
And then I know you were mentioning just the confusion of not knowing exactly what's happening, because right now what we do know is that it's related to the incident that happened there, but that's all we know. What's going through your mind just seeing this heavy police activity?
I walk my dog here most every other day. It's a brand new neighborhood. I would say that it's quite strange. I'm sure the neighbors hardly know each other yet since they just probably moved in. This was built maybe a year ago. So it's just concerning. It's very quiet, and it just goes to show that you may not know what's going on.
And you were mentioning, do you know anybody, at least in the home that they're currently outside, the officers?
I don't. No, I don't.
Okay, guys, well, that's all the information that we have right now. Just again, a lot of heavy police activity on Harris Ridge and Collins, a lot of concerned residents. We do know that some nearby schools are, not letting their students come out right now. Thank you so much, Stephen, for speaking to us. We'll make sure to keep you updated with any new details that we might have within the next hour.
Okay, Zuli Soldado, who is there in a neighborhood near Collins and Harris Ridge. U.S. Marshals are there, and they've had their guns trained on a home in that area. We're waiting to get an update on exactly what they're finding there. But the search for that suspect continues. Let me give you a full an idea of what's happened today. We are now approaching 4 hours after this incident started. This is a live look at the school, Timberview High School in Arlington. It is part of the Mansfield School District. Just after 9 a.m., reports of shots fired at the school. The school went into lockdown. Students took cover. We have learned.
All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to bring in Pat. Pat is former law enforcement. So let's see if I can get him in here. Pat, can you hear me? Oh, he may not.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I haven't finished the connection here. So let me get him in real quick. Oh, yep. No, he should be there. There you go. Now it may be that he can't hear me. Pat, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Yeah,
okay.
There might be a little bit of delay.
I cannot hear you. It may be that the audience can hear you. I don't know if the so well, let me get you on the camera first of all, and then that shall. I see you're talking and see the audio is clearly coming in, but for whatever reason, it's not getting to my headset. So I will. That's actually an easy fix. But what I want to do is, before anything, I would like to get you in on. So let me at least get it so people can see you, and that's just going to take 1 second here. And there we go. That should do it. And we'll make you just
I'm doing this from my phone, so it's like
there.
A little impromptu. So
okay, I can't hear a thing you're saying, so it may be that they can hear you, but it's still not. We'll get you we'll frame you up just a bit. Thank you very much, by the way, for calling. I can't. So let's just make sure that okay, so that's correct. That is not, but you know what? Actually, as long as so if I okay, so I can hear you both. So it's just that I cannot hear you, but I can actually probably. There's a couple ways to fix that, and the easiest right now. There you go. I should probably be able to hear you now. So how are you?
I'm good. Like I want to comment on, I've been out of law enforcement for a decade, but a lot of what you're seeing today are standard procedures that were developed, really going back to the Columbine shootings. This is pretty standard nationally. What we're seeing in Arlington here, I, jumped on the news before jumping on your show, and I'm not seeing anything out of the ordinary for as how has law enforcement responded in this. And frankly, it seems that I'm a little concerned that the sensationalized elements by media, what we're seeing is a critical incident, a shooting, but because of the location and the nature of it, we're having a level of media response that might be somewhat problematic. The sensational, like talking to the neighbors and talking to people. You're calling it filler. I'm calling it measured panic, right? The reason you see marshals at the location of the suspect's home is twofold, and other ATF and other local law enforcement. One, yes, you check the location to see if the suspect's retreated or egressed to that location. After determining they're not, then it's largely an evidence collection process. I mean, you can gain a lot of intelligence at that point, and the reason you're seeing the people there is in addition to an initial search location and initial, intel, is you got to obtain warrants. This is an active case that's ongoing. You have to lock down the scene in order to obtain evidence that's going to be later, possibly used in some type of criminal proceeding. So you're not just thinking about apprehension, although that's the primary concern of law enforcement right now in Texas. But you have to be able to, as we used to say in my job, you have to be able to walk and chew gum. You can't just wait until everything's over and then try to start preserving scenes and maintaining integrity of scenes in other locations. As far as transporting kids, these young adults from the high school to a secondary location for screening, that's extremely common now. That was developed in the 2000s. It seems to be the better way because even though the instant location suspects fled, there is going to be a systematic and thorough search of the primary location, which in this case would be the high school. Various elements are going to go. I wouldn't be surprised they didn't pull out a SWAT team or two in order to just do what we call precise methodological search of location. I've been on a lot of these. This was something I did. I had specialized weapons and tactics training. I mean, although we had what was called a tactical response team, not a SWAT team, but roughly it served the same purpose. So this is just, what we're seeing here until we really know more about the incident, what precipitated the incident, and what the aftermath, which is it's currently ongoing. So this is an active case. Media going out in the public and asking people how they feel about it. I'm kind of conflicted. We don't know enough to be polling the media, to be polling the public. Asking people, well, are you terrified for your children? Well, in our gun culture, overflowing country, you should be terrified all the time for your children. I mean, this is the reality of the world we live in, and a gun appearing on a school campus shouldn't be something that amazes and shocks people, given the plethora of firearms in the United States. Is it abhorrent what occurred? Yes, but is it reasonably foreseeable? You're the attorney, or you're the attorney's son. Reasonably foreseeable? I would have to say yes. So for that reason, I would all your listeners have a measured response. Yes, concern is appropriate, but have a larger reflection on the issues at hand here today, rather than just the victims are the victims. Hopefully we don't have anybody here that it died in this incident. Any loss of life is tragic, but whether or not we're going to consider this a mass shooting event, those definitions have changed within law enforcement over several decades. I would just caution people to take a breath before we weigh in on what we're going to say and how we're going to do, because ultimately this issue is about a violent culture with access to firearms and the need for our society to have a larger and very robust discourse. That's my opinion. That's the reason I really wanted to call in.
Well, hey, I think those are some excellent points. I'm conflicted too. I mean, I frame it in terms of the media has time to fill, because the reality is the media more and more is, of course, commercialized, and they have corporate sponsors that they need to satisfy, or else they don't get the money they need, and so they want to keep covering it as long as they can. But right now, everybody is dead in the water until the kid is found. At least dead in the water in terms of the drama. And I'll say this: I have friends who have drama channels. A drama channel on YouTube is one of those that goes into the community stuff, or some famous person is doing this, and those are so successful, they do great. And I always say I don't have a drama channel. That's not true. I absolutely have a drama channel. It's just, for me, drama is the real life, what's happening, and we don't get to pick and choose our drama. We wait until something like this happens, but then there's a lot of waiting. They do filler. Yeah, I'm not a fan of how they do filler, but I also try to temper that with realizing that I understand how and why. But I think I'd like to also have a discussion on how our media operates, because I'm not a big fan, while I do understand the issues with it. I do have a question, and oh yes, please.
Sure. I was just going to say, sometimes the media should remain silent until they have information. That's really my... there's been many times I've been asked for sound filler on a crime scene, and it was like, I don't have anything to tell you. And so they put up the I don't have anything to tell you. It's the sensationalization of these events that sometimes, people are scared enough when they hear about this. It's even worse when the media is starting to ask questions that, constitute what you would later identify as filler. Asking a bunch of moms how terrified they are just projects that anxiety throughout a community.
Well, and as I said earlier, we all already know they are. I think there's probably about 1,000 families there, and I will bet you I can say what's going through 99% of their heads. There's nothing, they're not saying anything we don't know. I do think it's worth, we let one mom speak for one, and then I tried to bypass the rest. I think it's worth hearing one just so that you have the human, but I think you've got a point. And that's all. And we know what, and then there's the leading questions too. Would you say that this was the most terrifying moment of, yeah, of course that's what they'd say. And they're right. I don't want to dismiss that, but Jesus. All right. So yeah, you're hitting on a pet peeve of mine as well. So I do want to know, you're in law enforcement. Let's just hypothetical here. You're in law enforcement in Texas right now. You're responsible for trying to find this guy. What are you doing to find this guy? Where are you looking, and how do you try to find this guy as quickly as possible?
Well, I can run down a checklist. You've heard the term APB, All Point Bulletin. I mean, you got a description of his vehicle and his car. You know, first thing you do, is there any electronic monitoring, whether active or inactive on the vehicle? You reactivate that. There's, you know, numerous traffic cameras and other monitoring systems throughout the state of Texas where, you know, you can start monitoring freeways remotely. You know, there's always aircraft options with your fixed wing aircraft or helicopters to, you know, monitor. There's civilian reports. So you're basically, at this point, you're gathering as much information on possible location. But even that, those folks at his house, right, they're probably looking for any and all information that could lead them to a possible terminal location for the suspect, someplace he might be going or someplace he might hide. Friends, family, associates. These are, you know, known locations. These are, you know, things you know. One thing you know, hey, does this kid go hiking? I mean, is he a camper? You know, I mean, just things like that. Is he what's you know, what do we believe his knowledge of the local areas like? Is he extremely well versed? Did he just recently move in? These are questions law enforcement's answering right now, and they're trying to really systematically figure out where he is and where he could possibly be going. And I mean, there's lots of tools, you know, sources and methods that are available to law enforcement. And as other larger agencies come, you know, right now you initially had the Arlington Police and the local sheriff's department, which was quickly you had state and federal law enforcement immediately respond through mutual aid, and those mutual aid agreements also bring those resources in. Those resources be quite extensive. I wouldn't be surprised if there isn't, you know, multiple different avenues of attempts to locate, you know, both electronic and visual surveillance being done, and the use of other forms of both media, cameras, closed circuit TV, and all that stuff being brought in as well. I mean, it's a lot of information coming in, but I'm fairly certain that they're doing everything they possibly can.
At 18, he probably has a cell phone, I would imagine. At least that's a distinct possibility.
Right.
So they could, okay.
Yeah, and if that cell phone's still active, they pinged it. If his car is new enough to have like even an active monitoring system on it, never was activated from the dealership, there's ways to do that once you have the vehicle identification number, the VIN, because you got the license plate. There's all kinds of things you can do to try to track people down. You know, the number of you know, what we call traffic monitoring cameras, but a lot of people call them speed cameras and other things. Some of those are passive. So, you know, like in so many states, their Department of Transportation have cameras just monitor flow of traffic. And you can use those in instances like this to actually locate vehicles. I mean, they may not have plate readers, but if you had a rough direction of travel in time, you can review video and even, you know, just verify, yes, he's on this interstate or this street at this time. And I mean, I guarantee people there's a lot of information out there you can grab.
All right. Hypothetical question, which I'm sure you love. So I'll do that, and then I'll probably do a quick rundown, and we'll continue. But a quick hypothetical. Let's assume he's found, and let's assume that he's found. He's still in his car, maybe parked somewhere. They find him. How do they approach him, and how do they what if you're there on the scene, they found him, and you're tasked with finding a way to de-escalate and get him into custody. What are you worried about, and how do you do it?
Well, so the hypothetical you asked has so many caveats that I'll start with is this a single officer finding and locating versus a coordinated effort of finding and locating? Is he found in you know, let's just say this is the problem, is there's so many moving parts on this that, you know, in ultimate, the goal of law enforcement in this case is to maintain public safety, the safety of the officers responding, but another primary goal is to apprehend the suspect, right? Law enforcement right now, and this is the grim, dark reality, when they contact this suspect eventually, because, you know, that's probably likely the scenario that's going to concern, they're going to measure they're going to have basically four metrics to measure how they're going to respond. One, how likely is this suspect to flee and to present an additional threat to the community? Honestly, that's fairly low given the incident so far. I mean, I'm not saying it's not, but this doesn't appear to be, we don't have multiple incident locations. It appeared that this was a point incident. Is he armed? Yes. Is he potentially dangerous? Yes. So given those caveats, but does he represent a high threat level to the community in large? He has a threat level, but it's probably not high given what's going on. Does he present a threat level to law enforcement? that's something being elevated. Obviously he does because he's armed, but has he made previous statements or give indications that he's likely to not, quote unquote, I'd rather die than go to jail. I mean, things like that help law enforcement maintain a profile on the response, right? Is he likely to flee? Well, yes, but if it's determined, like in a remote area, you can handle it differently than if in an urban environment. These are all things. I'd rather not hazard a guess on how they're going to do it. But in ultimate, the best case scenario is they'll isolate this suspect, prevent him from being able to flee in the vehicle if he's still in the vehicle, and then present a situation where time is at the behest of law enforcement. Apprehensions which become where you don't have time and you have a high likelihood of fleeing and then threat to public, those are when you see, that's where we have people shooting at fleeing vehicles and things like that, because the officers are having to gauge, the possibility to continue the threat and likelihood of additional threats to the public. But in a perfect scenario, you isolate and locate the suspect, right? You locate them, isolate them from being able to flee, and then allow time to become, by distance, you can create, if you have enough distance, whether or not he's armed becomes less critical to the situation. Self-infliction of a terminal wound, basically suicide is a likely and it's a credible possibility in a situation like this. So you want to prevent that in law enforcement as well. But you'll have to weigh and measure that versus time. Right. And, this is where negotiation, both, we use our hostage negotiator, but really just, tactical response negotiators come out. These are the people that you would like to use if you could isolate and prevent escape of the suspect. If he's in a car, he's out of gas and he's not going anywhere, and it's in the middle of some open field in Texas, you can take a lot of time. If he's if he's parked next to a 7-Eleven and he's got a full tank of gas, and he's revving the engine, that presents a different scenario. And those scenarios are so fluid and so myriad that it's really, I'm not doing any law enforcement officer in Texas any service by really just even giving a hypothetical answer. Just, the general criteria being you isolate the suspect if at all possible, prevent them from fleeing, and if it's a single officer on scene, he's going to be making a different set of evaluations than if it's me and a tactical response team responding, right? I mean, just different criteria for how you contact and deal with the situation.
That's a perfect answer. That's actually immensely helpful. So I think that gives us a pretty good idea of at least what's going through people's minds and the how this is going to be broken down and how they're going to think about it and try to because obviously everybody wants a solution to this that says that as little negative impact on the community and people around as possible, but it also has to be resolved and quickly. So I think you've given us a pretty good metric of how they.
Incidents like this are very sobering for communities. It really is. I mean, this is where a community sits down and has to evaluate a lot of the norms in our society. I'm sure there's going to be, and rightly so, there's going to be a very large dialogue for the next 2 or 3 days about guns, schools, kids, young adults. Really, he's 18, so he's a young adult. He's an adult, and we live in a society where this is the fundamental balance. Parents are terrified to send their kids to school, but what do we do to protect kids in school? In a culture, and the American culture has embraced gun ownership as an inherent right. In that culture, this is a foreseeable and reasonably foreseeable conclusion to this. I mean, a high school is a sensitive location because our kids are there and we're entrusting the state with our children's safety. That's essentially what a public high school is. But this is more about the location scaring people than the actual incident. This could have just as easily happened in a mall parking lot in Arlington, Texas, or along a street in Arlington, Texas, or in a church in Arlington, Texas. I do worry that sometimes the public and media, and this is where I go back at media, they sensationalize the location, not the actual incident itself. I mean, and I don't want to sound cynical, but incidents like this happen all the time. It's the location that's terrifying to the public.
Well, And that's an interesting point because, and I've used this number before, and people never believe me when I say. I mean, people say they just accuse me of outright lying. I think for last year the number was 412 mass shootings in the U.S. And people are like, that's not true. It's not 400.
Right.
Yeah, it was 412. Now, mass shootings, first of all, keep in mind, I think different people refer to mass shootings as different way. They have a different definition. The definition, I believe, for that number is 3 or more people.
3 or more people, yeah. And that's those definitions are basically set by the FBI now. You know, the Universal Crime Reporting and Statistical Unit actually has a lot to do with that. I mean, so that's why I gave that caveat when I first started talking. But if we look at these events where 2 or more people are injured in an act of violence involving a firearm, I think many Americans would be terrified to leave their house. And what's even worse is it's a question that's not being answered at, state and federal government. I mean, you want to live in our society? I worry. And I don't necessarily think banning gun ownership is the answer. I agree with you on that. But I do think that the first thing we have to address is gun culture. Right. It's an attitude and a mindset of a lot of people in our society that isn't going to be easily resolved. I've once, we're talking about Texas, and I've been to Texas a lot. I have family there. I always ask this question: what kind of message are we sending in rural Texas and even urban Texas, where people drive around with gun racks in their truck?
Which certainly there's no need for in modern society for whatever. I mean, right. you're trying to send a message. You're not. Yeah, please.
Right. I'm sorry. Exactly. I agreed. I was going to say that. Are you a rancher who needs a firearm, quick access to protect cattle and livestock? Well, absolutely drive around with a gun rack in your pickup truck. It's kind of, again, I don't want to stereotype, but if you live in an urban setting, your off-road vehicle's never been off-road. It's, your mud tires have never touched mud, except when you drive through a mud puddle in an urban setting and you have a gun rack, the gun rack of your truck is full of guns. What message are you sending? You're embracing a gun culture, which, immediate access to firearms has a higher propensity to be the way people resolve disputes, and they're resolving them with lethal efficiency. There was a comment earlier you made, and I went, ugh. My dad bought my mom a .22 caliber rifle. I'm going to tell you right now, as someone with tactical training, caliber doesn't matter. It's shot placement. Mm-hmm. I'd be more than willing to give you the biggest gun you ever wanted and take your mom's .22 and put a well-trained operator up against the most determined suspect. Because at this point, the lethality of a firearm has much less to do with the caliber. Now, what calibers do is they, from a ballistics point of view, calibers create cavitation. That's the tissue damage and all the, this is the issue with, do you survive the gunshot wound? But really, a .22 is an extremely lethal round. A lot of people have died from .22 caliber bullets. It's actually it's a fast traveling round. It's pretty nasty when it hits people. But this is the kind of thing. And this is exposing people to the realities of both tactical and firearms training, letting the average citizen who understands guns, has a familiarity with firearms. I don't even know if that necessarily generates a healthy respect, but there's also the lack of familiarity with firearms creates a certain amount of tension for an apprehension to people who don't understand it. If you don't understand what happened with the use of a firearm, it's very easy for someone with a lack of familiarity to even have higher levels of anxiety, especially when the media is sitting there and talking about, terms like semi-automatic versus automatic versus, bolt action. If you don't understand, those words can become very nervous to you.
Let me interrupt real quick because
sure.
We've got the chief of police speaking now, and I would like to hear what he has to say. So let me bring that audio up. I think you should be able to hear that, but now let me just
At least a lockout means that they are free to move within the school itself. So, but nobody can enter those schools. This is going to be a long-term, continuing investigation and processing the crime scene. So I will tell you again, I'm very proud to be part of this community. The Grand Prairie Police Department, Arlington Police Department, Mansfield Police Department, Mansfield Independent School District, and our federal partners. So it's going to be a long-term criminal investigation, which the Arlington Police Department will be the lead on the criminal side. The FBI is helping us here and will process the crime scene. We have ATF that we do have a weapon that was recovered. It was recovered in the streets in Grand Prairie. Grand Prairie Police Department recovered that. It is going to be turned over to ATF to run ballistics. More to come on that. I also just want to talk a little bit about social media. We've been having a lot of social media comments about threats to our schools from young kids. I want the message to be out there that this is not something to continue. We will investigate you. The federal government will also, our partners will be able to investigate you if you're not living in our city, and we will bring you to successful prosecution. So I'm just pleading with the community out there to try to stop any type of threats that are coming through social media. And I'm going to turn it over to Chief 𝐒𝐨𝐿𝐜𝐻𝐿.
Thank you, Kevin. Chief 𝐒𝐨𝐿𝐜𝐻𝐿 with Grand Prairie Police. Just a couple of comments I'd like to add and to underscore. Our teams have finished searching the school. We didn't find any additional threats. The suspect is in custody. I really want to underscore a point that Chief Colby just made. A lot of our law enforcement resources were being diverted with inaccurate social media threats. I've got a call to action for parents. Take a look at your kids' social media. If they're putting out threats on their schools, they're going to be arrested and they're going to be prosecuted. It's very important that you get involved with your kids' social media. During the entire onset of this event, our teams are being divided away from leads of our suspect location with inaccurate information at schools all over North Texas. So it would be very helpful to us for our parents to take a look at their social media accounts of their kids. Last thing I'll say is the collaborative effort with the Arlington Police Department, the Grand Prairie Police Department, the Marshals, North Texas Fugitive Task Force, and others, Arlington or Mansfield ISD, worked very well together to get the suspect into custody very quickly. I can tell you there is no danger to the public is safe, and the suspect is in custody. As it relates to the weapon mentioned by Chief Colby, our officers have transported a weapon they located in the street. We cannot confirm yet that it is the weapon. We believe it may be the weapon. It is being transported to our partners at the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms team to do some analysis to determine if it's the right weapon. Chief Colby's team and Chief Jones with Arlington Police is going to run lead on any investigative efforts. Grand Prairie Police Department will be here to support them however we can. With that, thank you. It was a handgun, .45 caliber weapon that was located. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief 𝐒𝐿𝐜𝐻𝐿. Chief Aaron from the city of Mansfield. Again, I want to echo that I hope what you see here is the response that you're going to get from Texas agencies. We're going to respond appropriately whenever the call comes out, and we're going to respond in unified response. What that means is that you just saw that the Mansfield Police Department's here standing alongside of the Mansfield ISD with Grand Prairie and Arlington. All of our federal partners are here. We brought this to a very quick resolve and without incident. I think it should be noted that everybody responded well and they responded appropriately in this. And I want to thank each and every one of y'all for being here. I also want to thank our viewers for sending us those leads. And again, I would have to echo the same thing in our city. If there is those false allegations that are going on social media, we are not going to tie up resources to those. We are going to prosecute those. We can't tie up resources, especially in an event like this, to track down unsubstantiated leads. So I would ask you to please continue to be involved in your children's lives, just like the chiefs are saying. Be involved in what's going on in your schools and know for sure that we are going to be standing here side by side with you. Thank y'all very much for your participation, and thank all y'all for being here.
Donald Williams, Mansfield ISD, Associate Superintendent for Communications. I want to begin by stating that it's been pretty impressive to see the tremendous work that is.
It sounded like you wanted to say something. I'm going to pause this for a minute anyway, because I think this is going to be just, I don't think there's going to be anything new here. It's just going to be, we'd like to thank yada, yada, yada. So what were you going to say?
So I didn't hear anything that the chief or the other officials said, but I can guarantee that whatever was said represents the best and most accurate and current information they had. So This is the kind of briefing that you need, right? So if you want to talk a little about what they discussed, I'm sure it's all what we would predict to be said. You know, they gave a status as best they could of the victims and the current status of the investigation and attempt to apprehend the suspect who's still outstanding. And that's really where we're going to be until...
He's in custody. It appears he's
okay.
Okay. They recovered a .45 that they believe was used in it, but they're transporting it, and they said they're going to be testing it.
Right.
And they said the school is all clear, and they are admonishing. Apparently, there have been a lot of other threats, like kids on social media going, "Yeah, I'm gonna attack the yada yada yada," and so they're asking parents to monitor their children's social media and make sure that they are commenting appropriately on this. And I will appreciate your patience, and I will double check and see if I can make sure that you get the sound if we do that again.
And see, this was given the status of the victims, have they updated on what their conditions are?
They have not, but I did see one thing. One is in ICU. The other two appear to they're still in the hospital, but they're not in intensive care. So ostensibly they are in somewhat better condition. So again, it was a .45, which is a pretty powerful weapon, as you would pointed out. You can kill someone with a .22, but it was a .45. They gave no information as to how how the suspect was apprehended. So what I'm going to do is let me bring that back on now, because they're moving away from the superintendent or person in charge of communication. So if they go back to police,
let's listen to them. I'm actually going to step out, and if you want me to come back in, I can. I'm using my phone. I can get to someplace a little better with less background noise for me. Thanks for letting me come in. And if you need me back on, just let me know, and I'll be in the chat.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. See you in a bit. Bye.
As a district, we're always looking at ways in which we can improve and get better in looking at that. But from the standpoint, we have law enforcement officers on every single one of our campuses. I think that's important for the community to know. And that's been something that's been a tremendous benefit for us as a school district. Once this particular incident occurred, the response time for our law enforcement officer that was there, present, and on the campus itself was pretty swift from that standpoint. So that's where we're at. We do not have metal detectors, but we do have law enforcement officers on every single one of our campuses.
So what is the plan to make sure nothing like this happens again?
What I spoke to earlier, we're going to reassess and evaluate the situation itself to look and see, did we have any gaps as it relates to what transpired, looking at getting better. So that's where we're going to move as far as evaluating what transpired, what took place, and move forward from there.
Are metal detectors in the future or a bag policy on the table?
Well, what I can say as it relates to metal detectors, about 3.5 years ago, we created a safety committee in which that was comprised of parents, students, community members, teachers, faculty, and staff. And the number one recommendation that came out of that particular task force was they wanted to have law enforcement officers on every campus. So that's where we moved at that particular point in time. Where we're at today is the fact that we're going to assess and evaluate every aspect of what transpired and then make recommendations as far as how we're going to move forward.
The students involved in the fight in the video and the suspect, can you confirm, are they currently enrolled? Were fully enrolled, or were they?
Yes, they were enrolled in Timberview High School. That's correct.
In the video, there's a kid with a white shirt. Is that the suspect? Can you confirm that for us?
I can't speak to that.
Because that video's been out that we want to confirm that it's him and that he's the suspect wearing a white shirt.
I've seen the video, and I cannot confirm that at this point in time because I don't know which one was who. So I'm sorry.
The parents mentioned that the fight actually took place yesterday. Is this something that you guys knew about?
You want to comment on that? Do you do? I don't have any information on that right now. So.
It speaks to, however, what you said earlier today, Chief, about what that video showcased. There was an act of bullying, there was fighting in that classroom, and subsequent, or post that, a weapon was presented and used in that classroom, in that school. So our understanding is, and to your knowledge based on the investigation, is that all this started from two kids fighting each other based on bullying, and he brought that gun in because of that.
You know, that's something that hopefully that we'll find out during our investigation. But I want to kind of go back to Mansfield Independent School District Police. They did a really good job. They have 2 police officers here. And when the police officers heard over the radio that there was a teacher that was in distress. The police officers immediately went to that classroom. And I can tell you that one police officer heard the shots as he was going up there. So I can tell you that they were on scene, quickly responded to this incident, and trying to render aid to those that were injured.
And just to be clear, that video, was that from today? Do we know, I mean, is it possible that that could have been yesterday or the day before? Or are we 100% sure that that video is from today?
I'm not 100% sure. All I know is
All right. So what I'm going to do here is I think it's appropriate to start wrapping this up. There's a few things I want to point out. And I thought Pat had brought up a good point, and it bears repeating. And he mentioned gun culture in the U.S. and that being perhaps and the ubiquity of guns. I don't want to straw man him, so if I'm misrepresenting him, he can correct me. But that being perhaps a bigger problem than specifically the Second Amendment per se. And I think he brought up some excellent points. I also think, and this is one that we touched on, I'd like to, last year, 430 mass shooting incidents in the U.S. And most Americans, you tell them that, and I've gotten into gun control discussions, and they'll say, you're lying, it's not that many. Well, it's because we don't cover them all. And we have more than one a day on average in the U.S., and that's a fact. There's nothing you can do about that. But we don't cover them all any more than we cover the accidents that kill 40,000 Americans on our highways every year. We don't cover every accident. It's a lot of people dying, a decent number of mass shootings, and we just don't cover it. The ones we cover are the ones that happen in sensitive areas, such as schools and stuff like this. But this is... if we're going to maintain our average, there's probably about a 20% chance that this is one of two mass shootings that happened today. It's just the one that we're covering because it was at a high school. So it's obviously a big problem, and it gets highlighted when it's at a school or, again, some other sensitive area. But I would like to thank Pat very much for coming on and sharing his expertise as a former law enforcement officer. So I think that was a great idea, and I appreciate his offering to do that. I'd like to discuss this and a few other issues with him because he's very knowledgeable on these things. When it's more appropriate now is probably not the time. But for those of you who are just joining us, earlier today, a student allegedly fired at a high school. He got into an argument with what appears to be two other students, fired what at this point we believe was a 45 caliber handgun, struck at least, I think now we can say struck ostensibly three people. One of them was a teacher. One was a 15-year-old student who is now in critical condition at the ICU. The other two, we don't know their condition except that it appears they are not in the ICU and they are in the hospital. There was a fourth injury. We do not know the nature of the injury, but we do know that that person was treated on site and appears to be fine. The student got into, he's an 18-year-old boy who got into, young man, who then got into his car and fled. There was a statewide manhunt for him involving ATF, federal marshals, and, of course, the police. And that lasted for, it looks like, about 4 hours, and they finally apprehended him. To the best of our knowledge now, he is alive and in okay shape. We have no word of him being transported to the hospital or anything like that. So he is in custody. The weapon has been recovered, or a weapon has been recovered, and they are attempting to confirm whether or not it was a weapon that was used. So again, one teacher, one 15-year-old student, and one other student we do not know about. All appear to have gunshot wounds. The alleged shooter is now in custody. So again, that just about wraps it up. Again, it's about a 20% chance that there's at least one other mass shooting today somewhere in the U.S. If not, chances are pretty good there's going to be one or two tomorrow. That's just the way the numbers work out. That's a topic for another time, but I think Pat brought that up, and I think it was worthwhile. So unless anything else comes up in the live chat in the next minute or so, I think it's probably worth wrapping this up. I do want to thank everybody for their time. And thank you all for, I think there was a lot of worthwhile discussion in the live chat too. So, and that's a picture of The suspect, let me see if I can snag his name again, Timothy George Simpkins, 18 years old, fired and struck 3 people at his high school. One of them, a 15-year-old child, now in the ICU. One is a teacher. His status is unknown, as is the status of one other victim. It appears to be that he just had a fight at the high school. It's possible, we're hearing now, that maybe that fight was a continuation of a fight that had happened previously. So it may be he decided to bring that gun in. So he had the fight on the prior day, brought the firearm in, making sure he wasn't going to lose the fight today, I guess. I don't know. But at any rate, obviously, we will be learning more throughout the day. Later tonight, we will be doing an overtime. Joe will be on. We're going to cover today's news. We will probably touch on this briefly and certainly give people an update, but the topic of the overtime is not going to be to rehash a gun control or any of the major issues. There's going to be a lot to discuss tonight. So, and we've already hit some of it now, and we can certainly do a separate show on it later if that appears to be warranted. In the meantime, thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you all tonight for overtime, and then after dark on Friday, 10 p.m. Anyone who wants to call in can call in and chat and discuss any topic you guys want to discuss. So in the meantime, my name is Nicholas Lamar Suter. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you tonight.